It hath reached me, O auspicious king, O lion of the age and pearl of the morning, that in the long forgotten annals of the ancient world there lived a fisherman. He was a man well stricken in years, upon whose face the sun and the salt wind had carved deep lines like the furrows of a plowed field. He possessed a wife and 3 children, and withal he was of such poor condition that the mice in his house wept for hunger, and the spiders spun no webs for lack of flies. Yet, despite the hollowness of his purse and the raggedness of his garb, he was a man of devout heart and rigid habit. It was his custom, a vow made in the fervor of his youth and kept in the frailty of his age, to cast his net every day 4 times and no more. He would not tempt fate by asking too much, nor would he insult Providence by asking too little. On a day of days, when the heat lay heavy upon the earth like a woolen blanket, and the sky was a dome of polished brass, he rose before the call to prayer had fully faded from the minarets. He looked upon his sleeping children, their ribs showing like the ridges of sand on the beach, and his heart contracted with a father's grief. He kissed the forehead of his wife, who whispered, "May Allah grant thee a white day, O father of my children," and he went forth about noontide to the seashore. The walk was long, and the stones of the path bit into his calloused feet. When he reached the margin of the deep, the sun was high, turning the waves into a blinding shield of hammered silver. He set down his basket, which was light with emptiness, and looked out over the vast, indifferent waters. He sighed, "O provider, thou knowest my need," and tucking up his shirt and plunging into the water, made a cast with his net. He cast it with the skill of a lifetime. The net flew like a cloud of mesh, expanding in the air before hitting the water with a hiss, sinking down into the cool green depths. He waited till it settled to the bottom. Then he gathered the cords together and haled away at it, but found it weighty. The resistance was immense, as if he had caught the very floor of the ocean. However much he drew it landwards, he could not pull it up. The cords cut into his hands, and the sweat stung his eyes. "Surely," he thought, his heart pounding against his ribs, "this is a great fish, a king of fishes, that shall feed my house for a month. Or perhaps it is a chest of merchandise lost from a foundered ship." So he carried the ends ashore and drove a stake into the ground and made the net fast to it. Then he stripped his thin, old body and dived into the water all about the net, struggling with the unseen burden, pulling and heaving, and left not off working hard until he had brought it up. He rejoiced thereat, donning his clothes, and went to the net to claim his prize. But when he opened the meshes, there was no silver gleam of scales, no thrashing of life. He found in it only a dead jackass, bloated and foul, which had torn the meshes with its rotting hooves. The stench was such that the birds of the air wheeled away in disgust. Now when he saw it, the fisherman exclaimed in his grief, "There is no majesty, and there is no might save in Allah the glorious, the great." He looked at the carcass, a mockery of his labor, and quoth he, "This is a strange manner of daily bread. Surely the world is turned upside down." He paused to recite verses of lamentation, crying out to the empty beach about the cruelty of labor without reward and the capriciousness of sustenance. Then, shaking the despair from his shoulders, he got the carcass free of the toils, though the work was foul. He wrung out and spread his net, sitting on the hot sand to repair the tears with patience born of necessity. Then he plunged into the sea, saying, "In Allah's name," and made a second cast. He waited as the net sank, praying for a grouper or a sea bream or even a handful of crabs. He pulled at it, but it grew heavy and settled down more firmly than the first time. The weight was solid, unmoving. "Verily," he thought, "this must be a turtle of great size." He made it fast, doffed his clothes, went into the water, and dived and haled until he drew it up upon dry land. His muscles trembled with fatigue. Then found he in it neither fish nor turtle, but a large earthen pitcher which was full of sand and mud, heavy with the saturation of the sea. Seeing this, the fisherman was greatly troubled. His stomach cramped with hunger, and the vision of his children's faces rose before him. He prayed pardon of Allah for his momentary anger, and, throwing away the jar, wrung his net and cleansed it of the slime and weeds. He returned to the sea the 3rd time to cast his net. The sun was now dipping past its zenith, painting the water in hues of bruised purple and gold. He waited till the net had sunk, then he pulled at it. Again, resistance. Again the hope that springs eternal in the human breast flared up. He hauled it in, hand over hand, his back aching. He found therein not a fish, but potsherds, broken glass, and bones of ancient things. The sea seemed to be mocking him, offering up its refuse in exchange for his sweat. Raising his eyes heavenwards, he said, "O my God, verily, thou wottest that I cast not my net each day save 4 times. The 3rd is done, and as yet thou hast vouchsafed me nothing. My basket is empty, and the sun is setting. So this time, O my God, deign give me my daily bread." Then, having called on Allah's name, he again threw his net. It flew out, a silhouette against the dying light, and he waited its sinking and settling. Whereupon he hailed at it, but could not draw it in, for that it was entangled at the bottom. He cried out in his vexation, "There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah." Thereupon he stripped for the 4th time, shivering now in the cooling breeze, and diving down to the net, busied himself with it till it came to land. He dragged it up the shingle, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Then he opened the meshes and found therein no fish, but a cucumber-shaped jar of yellow copper. It was evidently full of something, for it was heavy, and its mouth was made fast with a leaden cap stamped with the seal ring of our Lord Solomon, son of David. Allah accept the twain. Seeing this, the fisherman rejoiced with a joy that banished his fatigue. He traced the intricate seal with his finger, the seal that binds the jinn and commands the winds. He said, "If I sell it in the brass bazaar, 'tis worth 10 golden dinars. 10 dinars, that is bread for a year." He shook it, and finding it heavy, continued, "Would to heaven I knew what is herein, but I must and will open it and look to its contents." And taking out a knife, he worked at the lead. The cap was set firm, ancient and corroded by the salt sea, but the fisherman was desperate. He chipped and pried until he had loosened it from the jar. Then he laid the cup on the ground and shook the vase to pour out whatever might be inside. He tipped it upside down. He shook it violently. He found nothing in it. "Empty?" he whispered, whereat he marveled with an exceeding marvel. But presently, as he watched, there came forth from the jar a smoke which spired heavenwards into ether. The smoke was thick, opaque, and of many colors, blue as the deep ocean, black as the storm, and red as old blood. It trailed along earth's surface, crawling like a living thing, till presently, having reached its full height, the thick vapor condensed. It swirled and solidified, the wind dying down and the birds falling silent. The smoke became an ifrit, huge of bulk, whose crest touched the clouds while his feet were on the ground. His head was as a dome, immense and bald. His hands were like pitchforks, talons sharp enough to rend iron. His legs were long as masts, thick and corded with muscle. His mouth was big as a cave, and from it came a breath hot as a furnace. His teeth were like large stones, jagged and yellow. His nostrils were like ewers, blowing steam. His eyes were 2 lamps burning with an ancient malevolent fire. Now when the fisherman saw the ifrit, he stood frozen. His side muscles quivered, his teeth chattered like dice in a box. His spittle dried up, and he became blind about what to do. Upon this, the ifrit looked at him. The voice of the monster rolled like thunder across the waves, shaking the very sand beneath the fisherman's feet. He cried, "There is no God but the God, and Solomon is the prophet of God." Then, seeing the fisherman, the ifrit cowered slightly, raising his arm as if to ward off a blow, and added, "O apostle of Allah, slay me not. Never again will I gainsay thee in word, nor sin against thee in deed." Quoth the fisherman, his courage returning slightly as he realized the giant was confused. "O Merid, didst thou say, Solomon the apostle of Allah? And Solomon is dead some 1,800 years ago, and we are now in the last days of the world. What is thy story, and what is thy account of thyself, and what is the cause of thy entering into this cucurbit?" Now when the evil spirit heard the words of the fisherman, and saw that he was no prophet, but a simple man in rags, he straightened his back. The fear left his eyes, replaced by a cruel arrogance. Quoth he, "There is no God but the God. Be of good cheer, O fisherman." Quoth the fisherman, "Why biddest thou me to be of good cheer?" And the ifrit replied, a grin spreading across his cavernous face, "Because of thy having to die an ill death in this very hour." Said the fisherman, "Thou deservest for thy good tidings the withdrawal of heaven's protection. Wherefore shouldest thou kill me, and what thing have I done to deserve death? I who freed thee from the jar and saved thee from the depths of the sea. Is this the gratitude of the jinn?" Replied the ifrit, Ask of me only what mode of death thou wilt die. Rejoined the fisherman, What is my crime? Quoth the Ifrit, Hear my story, O fisherman. Know that I am one among the heretical Jan, the rebels who refuse the yoke of righteousness. I sinned against Solomon, David's son. I defied his edicts, whereupon the prophet sent his minister, Asaph, son of Barchiah, to seize me. And this wazir brought me against my will and led me in bonds to him, and he placed me standing before him like a suppliant. When Solomon saw me, he bade me embrace the true faith and obey his behests, but I refused. So, sending for this cucurbit, he shut me up therein. He poured molten lead over the mouth, and on that lid he impressed the Most High name, the seal that binds us utterly. Then he gave his orders to the faithful Jan, who carried me off. They flew with me to the middle of the ocean and cast me into the midmost of the deep. There I abode. During the first 100 years I said in my heart, Whoso shall release me, him will I enrich for ever and ever. But the full century went by, and when no one set me free, I entered upon the second 50. I said, Whoso shall release me, for him I will open the hordes of the earth. Still no one set me free, and thus 400 years passed away. My heart grew cold, the hope turned to bitterness. Then, quoth I, Whoso shall release me, for him will I fulfill 3 wishes. Yet no one set me free. Thereupon I waxed wroth with exceeding wrath. I said to myself, Whoso shall release me from this time forth, him will I slay. I will tear him limb from limb, for humanity has forgotten me. But because he freed me, I will give him choice of what death he will die. And now, O fisherman, as thou hast released me, I give thee full choice of deaths. The fisherman, hearing the words of the Ifrit, said, O Allah, the wonder of it that I have not come to free thee save in these days. Spare my life, so Allah spare thine, and slay me not, lest Allah set one to slay thee. Replied the contumacious one, There is no help for it, die thou must. The fisherman said to himself, This is a Jinni, he is a creature of fire and smoke. But I am a man, to whom Allah hath given a passably cunning wit. I will now cast about to compass his destruction by my contrivance. He began by asking the Ifrit, Hast thou indeed resolved to kill me? And receiving for all answer, Even so. He cried, Now in the most great name, graven on the seal ring of Solomon, and I question thee on a certain matter, wilt thou give me a true answer? The Ifrit replied, Yea, but, hearing mention of the most great name, his wits were troubled, and he said with trembling, Ask and be brief. Quoth the fisherman, How didst thou fit into this bottle which would not hold thy hand? No, nor even thy foot. And how came it to be large enough to contain the whole of thee? Replied the Ifrit, What? Dost not believe that I was all there? And the fisherman rejoined, Nay, I will never believe it until I see thee inside with my own eyes. The Ifrit, stung by pride and eager to prove his power, shook and became a vapor. The smoke condensed and entered the jar little and little, like a tornado funneling into a chimney till all was well inside. When lo! The fisherman in hot haste took the leaden cap with the seal and stoppered therewith the mouth of the jar and called out to the Ifrit, saying, Ask me by way of boon what death thou wilt die. By Allah, I will throw thee into the sea before us. Now when the Ifrit heard this and saw himself in limbo, he was minded to escape, but this was prevented by Solomon's seal. He waxed lowly and submissive and began humbly to say, I did but jest with thee. But the other answered, Thou liest, O vilest of the Ifrits. Just a moment ago I was thy prey, and now I am thy brother. And the fisherman set off with the bottle for the seaside. The Ifrit called out, Nay, nay, and the fisherman, I. The Ifrit pleaded, Release me, O fisherman, and I will pledge to do thee no harm, and I will enrich thee so thou shalt never know want again. The fisherman paused and said, Nay, I fear that if I release thee, thou wilt treat me as the wazir treated the sage Duban. And who was the wazir, and who was the sage Duban? Quoth the Ifrit. The fisherman sat on the sand, holding the jar captive, and began the tale. Know, O Ifrit, that there was once in the city of the Persians a king named Yunnan. He was a great ruler, rich in armies, but he was afflicted with a leprosy which the leeches and the doctors had failed to heal. He drank potions and bathed in sulfur, but to no avail. Now into his city there came a sage named Duban, a man who had studied books in Greek, Persian, Syriac, and Arabic, and knew the properties of all plants. When the sage heard of the king's illness, he went to him and said, "O king, I will cure thee without making thee drink a draught or anoint thyself." The king marveled and said, "If thou doest this, I will enrich thee even to thy children's children." The sage went home and carved a mallet for the game of polo. He hollowed out the handle and placed within it his secret medicines. He brought it to the king and said, "Go forth and play polo with this mallet. Grip it hard. When thy palm sweats, the medicine will penetrate thy body." The king did as he was bid. The next morning, when the king arose, he found his skin pure as virgin silver. He rejoiced and summoned the sage Duban, clothing him in a robe of honor and seating him at his side. But kings have wazirs, and often these wazirs are envious. King Yunnan had a wazir of ugly soul who approached him and said, "O king, this man who cured thee with a piece of wood, if he can save thee with a handle, surely he can kill thee with a smell. He is a spy." The king at first refused to believe it, but the wazir whispered poison in his ear until the king's heart turned. He summoned the sage and said, "I must kill thee before thou killest me." The sage Duban cried, "Spare me, and Allah shall spare thee. Slay me not, lest Allah slay thee." But the king was resolute in his folly. The sage said, "Grant me a respite. I have a book, a secret book of wonders. If thou cuttest off my head, place my head upon the book, and my severed head will speak to thee." The king was amazed and agreed. The next day the executioner struck, and the head of the sage rolled upon the carpet. The king placed the head upon the book. He tried to open the pages, but they were stuck together. He licked his finger to separate them. He turned one page, then another, licking his finger each time. He found nothing written. Suddenly the drugs that had been on the pages, poison of the most subtle kind, entered the king's body through his saliva. He fell back, convulsed. The head of the sage Duban opened its eyes and spoke. They made use of their power and used it tyrannically, and soon it was as though they had never existed. And so the king died, slain by the dead sage. "And thou, O Ifrit," continued the fisherman, "art like that king. Hadst thou spared me, I would have spared thee. But thou soughtest my death, so I will throw thee into the sea." The Ifrit screamed from within the jar, "By Allah, do not do it. Spare me, and I swear by the most great name of Allah that I will not harm thee, and I will make thee rich." The fisherman stopped. The oath of the most great name was a binding thing that no Jinni could break without perishing. "Dost thou swear it?" "I swear it," cried the Ifrit. The fisherman removed the cap. The smoke poured out and reformed into the giant Ifrit. The Ifrit kicked the jar into the sea. The fisherman was terrified, but the Ifrit laughed and said, "Follow me." They walked past the city, over a mountain, and into a desert valley where the silence was heavy and the air still. There, nestled between two dark hills, was a blue lake. The Ifrit said, "Cast thy net here." The fisherman looked into the water and saw fish of 4 colors, white, red, blue, and yellow. He marveled, for he had never seen their like. He cast his net and caught 4 fish, one of each color. The Ifrit said, "Take these to the Sultan. He will give thee what will make thee rich, but cast thy net here only once a day." Then the Ifrit struck the earth with his foot. The ground opened and he disappeared. The fisherman took the 4 fish to the Sultan's palace. The Sultan was amazed by their beauty and gave the fisherman 400 dinars. The fisherman returned home, rejoicing, and bought food and clothes for his family. Meanwhile, the Sultan gave the fish to his cookmaid. She gutted them and placed them in a pan to fry. Suddenly, the wall of the kitchen opened and a beautiful damsel entered, holding a wand of myrtle. She spoke to the fish, saying, O fish, are ye constant to your covenant?" And they raised their heads from the frying pan and spoke back, "Yes, yes, if thou reckon, we reckon. If thou payest, we pay. If thou fliest, we fly." The damsel overturned the pan and vanished. The fish were charred to charcoal. The cookmaid swooned. The Sultan ordered more fish. The fisherman caught 4 more. The same thing happened, but this time the wazir was watching. The wazir told the Sultan. The Sultan demanded to see it himself. The fisherman brought 4 more fish. This time, when the fish were in the pan, the wall clave asunder, and a huge black slave, terrifying to behold, burst through. He held a green branch and cried to the fish, "O fish, are ye constant?" And they replied as before. The slave overturned the pan and vanished. The fish were ruined. The Sultan said, "There is a mystery here. I must solve it." He questioned the fisherman, who told him of the colored lake. The Sultan, the court, and the army traveled to the lake. They marveled at the blue water in the desert. That night, the Sultan set out alone to explore the area. He walked until he saw a light. He approached and found a magnificent palace of black stone, plated with iron. He entered, but found no one. He walked through halls of gold and velvet until he heard a low moaning. He followed the sound to a chamber where a young man sat upon a throne. The young man was handsome, clad in robes of embroidered silk, but his face was pale with sorrow. The Sultan greeted him, but the young man did not rise. "Excuse me, O king," he said, "but I cannot stand." He lifted his robe, and the Sultan gasped. The young man was flesh from the waist up, but black marble from the waist down. "What is this?" cried the Sultan. "And what is the meaning of the colored fish?" The young man, the ensorcelled prince, wept and told his story. "Know, O Lord, that this city was once a thriving capital, and I was its king. I married my cousin, a woman I loved more than my eyes, but she was a sorceress, and she hated me. One day, I discovered she had a lover, a black slave who lived in a hovel outside the city. I followed her and found them together. In my rage, I drew my sword and struck the slave in the neck, thinking I had killed him. I fled, but he did not die. He was only wounded, yet he lost his speech. My wife, in her grief and fury, cast a spell upon me. She turned the lower half of my body to stone so I can neither live nor die. She turned my city into a lake and my people into fish. The Muslims became white, the Magians red, the Christians blue, and the Jews yellow. And every day she comes to me, strips me, and beats me with a bull's hide until I bleed, and then she puts a hair shirt on my wounds. Then she goes to the hovel where her lover lies, speechless and crippled, to feed him broth." The Sultan, his heart burning with indignation, said, "O prince, thou shalt be avenged." He asked where the lover lay. The prince directed him to the mausoleum of tears in the garden. The Sultan went there at night. He found the slave lying on a cot, breathing shallowly. The Sultan drew his sword and, with a swift stroke, slew the slave. He dragged the body away and threw it into a well. Then he lay down on the cot and covered himself with the slave's veil. Presently, the sorceress arrived. She had just finished beating her husband. She entered the mausoleum and cooed, "O my master, speak to me." The Sultan, mimicking the thick, pained voice of the slave, mumbled, "There is no power but in Allah." The sorceress was overjoyed. "My master, thou speakest!" The Sultan said, "How can I heal when the cries of thy husband disturb my sleep? And how can I rest when the people of this city, turned to fish, cry out to heaven against thee?" "I will silence them," she cried. "I will restore them." "Go then," said the Sultan. "Restore the king and the people, then come back to me, and I shall be well." The sorceress ran to the palace. She took a cup of water, spoke words over it until it boiled, and sprinkled it on the prince, saying, "By the power of the spell, become a man again." The marble turned to flesh, and the prince stood up whole. She then ran to the lake, sprinkled the water, and the fish became men, women, and children again. The city rose from the water, the shops opened, and the noise of life returned. She ran back to the mausoleum. "It is done, my master! Come to my arms!" The Sultan threw off the veil, shouted, "Come hither!" And as she approached, he drew his sword and cut her in twain. The Sultan and the prince embraced. They found the old fisherman who was waiting in terror and brought him to the palace. The prince said, "I will travel with thee to thy capital, O Sultan." They returned to the Sultan's city with the fisherman. The Sultan summoned the fisherman's daughters. He married the eldest, and the prince married the youngest. The Sultan made the fisherman's son his royal treasurer, and they all lived in the height of joy and prosperity, ruling with justice and wisdom, until there came to them the destroyer of delights and the severer of societies, the desolate and inevitable death.